In the early 1790s, America stood on shaky ground. The Revolutionary War left the nation in debt, a burden no one wanted to carry. Enter Alexander Hamilton, the original financial architect. In 1791, he created the Bank of the United States. This was no ordinary institution. It was designed to stabilize the nation's credit, manage cash flow, and serve as a cornerstone for the fledgling economy. The bank became the United States' financial heartbeat. Hamilton envisioned the bank as a bold experiment, a means to grow national wealth while providing consistent oversight over the burgeoning financial sector. Against a backdrop of skepticism and resistance, the institution launched under a 20-year charter, inviting both hope and criticism. It became a powerful tool, holding federal funds, regulating currency, and providing loans that fueled expansion. The bank's influence wasn't just monetary, it shaped policy and governance. Its existence spurred state banks to pop up, eager to capitalize on the newfound financial landscape. This architecture of ambition, however, rested precariously upon confidence. When Hamilton's plans began taking shape, it sparked debates that ignited a divide between Federalists and Republicans, leading to intense scrutiny of the bank's actions. Fast forward to 1812. The United States found itself embroiled in the War of 1812 against Great Britain. The country's very sovereignty was at stake, but funding the war effort stretched the bank's resources dangerously thin. As government borrowing surged, the bank had to extend loans to finance troop movements, supplies, and weapons, drawing on its limited capital reserves. The pressure mounted, and the fragile web of finance began to fray. The bank's ambitions collided with harsh realities. Though it initially bolstered the economy, the burdens of war drained its capabilities and fueled speculation. As the fighting raged on, diverging interests emerged. Some bankers grew rich by supplying arms and munitions, while others suffered crushing defeats as loans went unpaid. Confidence began to wobble. In early 1814, the situation became critical. An accumulating crisis loomed over the financial landscape, one that no one could ignore. The combination of war expenses and mismanagement bred panic. Rumors circled that the bank could not fulfill its obligations. On one fateful day, word spread that the bank might default. Panic became palpable. Depositors rushed to withdraw their funds, fearing they would be left with nothing. Lines formed outside the doors. People clamored, anxious to reclaim their savings. But the bank had extended itself too far, and cash reserves dwindled. What had started as a symbol of financial security devolved into a vortex of chaos. The very institution meant to stabilize the country's economy now faced collapse. Its downfall would resonate far beyond Philadelphia, threatening the fiscal foundation of a young nation. An enormous financial storm was gathering strength, reaching a breaking point. As debates intensified over the bank's future, Congress grappled with competing visions of America's financial destiny. Yet questions loomed large. Would the United States weather this storm of financial catastrophe? Could the nation rebound from its own hubris? The answers lay just around the corner, and with them hung the fate of the American economy. As the War of 1812 raged on, the tension in the streets of Philadelphia mirrored the chaos within the walls of the Bank of the United States. Increased demand for currency surged as military expenditures skyrocketed, fueling an insatiable thirst for loans to equip soldiers and fund operations. The stakes were high, and the bank was caught in a financial maelstrom that few knew how to navigate. But as the war intensified, the British blockade tightened, crippling trade routes crucial for the young nation's economy. Ships laden with goods stood idle in ports, their holds empty, while the sound of clashing cannons echoed in the distance. This blockade didn't merely strangle exports, it also choked off vital revenue for the bank. Payments dwindled, and the once thriving marketplace fell silent. Merchants, unable to sell goods, began to default on their loans, triggering a chain reaction that rippled through the financial system. With revenue drying up and military funding escalating, the bank's leadership made increasingly reckless decisions. Desperate to sustain the war effort, they extended risky loans to businesses with shaky prospects. This behavior wasn't out of malice. It stemmed from the belief that victory was just around the corner. The logic seemed sound. Back the war now, reap the rewards later. But their optimism turned into folly. As time wore on, the reality of mounting losses became insurmountable. The bank found itself holding on to a growing stack of bad debts. Confidence ebbed, and whispers of impending failure grew louder. Bankers began to turn on one another, blaming each other for the dire circumstances. The very foundation of the financial establishment began to crumble under the weight of its own miscalculations. Then came the fateful spring day in 1814. The rumors that had circulated for months reached a fever pitch. Depositors rushed to the bank, desperate to retrieve their savings. But how could the bank's directors reassure them when its own coffers were nearly bare? Panic erupted. Lines formed around the block, faces filled with worry as families feared losing their financial lifelines. As depositors clamored for their money, the minutes stretched into an eternity. Each tick of the clock weighed heavily on the anxious crowd outside. The realization dawned on them. They were witnessing the collapse of not just a financial institution, but a critical pillar of the American economy. The irony stung deeply. The very mechanism designed to support the nation's fiscal needs had fallen victim to the greed and short-sightedness of its leaders during one of its most trying times. But this crisis was not just about numbers on a ledger. It was personal. Lives depended on the outcomes of these financial maneuvers. People lost not only their savings, but their livelihoods. The implications of the bank's failure rippled beyond Philadelphia, threatening to destabilize the nation. As uncertainty loomed large, Congress faced pivotal decisions. Would they extend a lifeline to the bank or let it sink under the weight of its debts? The fate of countless families, and possibly the integrity of the nation itself, hung in the balance. What sacrifice would the young country need to make to restore stability? And could it rise from the ashes of its own misjudgments? The answers lay just ahead, shrouded in the complexities of human ambition and greed. Fear and uncertainty gripped Philadelphia. As whispers of the bank's peril spread, depositors raced against each other, desperate to salvage their savings. Lines formed outside the bank, each person hoping their withdrawal would not be the last. This was the panic of 1814, a cascading wave of anxiety that pushed the citizens to their limits. It wasn't just money at stake, it was trust. Once a cornerstone of American financial stability, the bank was crumbling under the weight of its harsh miscalculations. As depositors flooded the doors, disaster struck. The urgency heightened. People clamored for their cash, but the bank's vaults stood bare. The echoes of anxious voices filled the street as the Bank of the United States faced an insurmountable crisis. While chaos reigned in the financial district, the city itself battled against the backdrop of the War of 1812. Fires blazed across Philadelphia, ignited by military skirmishes and exacerbated by inadequate firefighting efforts. The city's resources were stretched thin. Firefighting teams pulled into the military draft to serve in the war left the city vulnerable. Uncontrolled blazes claimed blocks of homes, small businesses, and manufacturing plants, further crippling the local economy. It wasn't just your own bank that was collapsing. Your entire community was disintegrating around you. The bank's precarious situation worsened daily. As rumors grew, so too did distrust. The stock market tumbled. Financial speculation crumbled. Credit was a commodity that slipped from grasp, and the very foundation of financial stability began to dissolve. The once mighty institution, intended to stabilize America's economy, was now sending shockwaves through the nation like ripples across a turbulent sea. In April 1814, the inevitable announcement reverberated throughout the country. The Bank of the United States declared it would cease all operations. "We can no longer pay our debts," the board proclaimed, leaving a vacuum of fear and uncertainty in its wake. Thousands of people were left in the lurch. Businesses shuttered, families were uprooted, and the loss transcended mere financial despair. It rattled the very identity of American ambition. With government intervention looming on the horizon, Congress found itself at a crossroads. Could any measure save the nation from economic collapse? Would the government step in to salvage what was left of public confidence, or would it all unravel, dragging the fledgling country into chaos? The stakes couldn't be higher. As the echoes of failure echoed through the halls of power, the question remained: what drastic measures would Congress take to restore faith in a broken system? Would it be enough to quell the panic swelling across the nation, or was America on the brink of calamity? As the clock ticked and tensions rose, answers loomed just out of reach, compelling us to look closer into the aftermath of the bank's fall. The immediate aftermath of the Bank of the United States collapse plunged Philadelphia into chaos. As news spread that the institution was shuttering its doors, panic erupted among depositors. Crowds gathered outside the bank, their faces etched with anxiety and disbelief. People rushed in a frenzy, clutching hopeful withdrawal slips. But inside, the doors were locked, the vaults empty. Savings that families had entrusted to the bank for generations were now but a fading memory. Scores of merchants watched helplessly as their businesses crumbled, unable to make payroll or pay suppliers. Local shops that had flourished found themselves barren. Banks closed, letters of credit defaulted, and deals that once seemed secure unraveled overnight. The delicate web of commerce started fraying. Retailers, artisans, and tradespeople faced ruin. Families, suddenly bereft of financial stability, were thrust into despair. Rents went unpaid, and bystanders witnessed neighbors lose their livelihoods. In the heart of this financial storm, skepticism festered. Distrust toward the banking system, once a cornerstone of fiscal security, blossomed into widespread disdain. Citizens questioned how their government could allow such calamity to ripple through society. Where was the accountability? The cries for reform resonated from the streets to the halls of power. The collapse of the bank became a rallying point for those advocating for more stringent oversight. What began as a crisis of one institution morphed into a broader critique of federal financial practices. In the weeks following the bank's disappearance, tensions rose within Congress. Should the federal government intervene with a bailout to restore public confidence? Or was it time for states to reclaim financial sovereignty, reducing the risk of a national financial catastrophe? Lawmakers were keenly aware that the decisions they made would shape the future of their economy and the very fabric of governance. This discontent laid the groundwork for a significant shift in the relationship between state and federal powers. The following decades would witness a series of adjustments aimed at preventing such an unprecedented collapse from occurring again. Public opinion foresaw a transformed landscape where private banking and state-chartered banks would emerge, each with their own regulations. A mixed financial system began to take shape, one that straddled the line between state control and private enterprise. Despite this evolving landscape, the scars of 1814 persisted. The vision of a stable national bank seemingly shattered. As generations passed, the memory of the Bank of the United States would remain a poignant reminder of the fragility of financial institutions. The encounter pushed the nation toward a more decentralized banking system, which many believed would protect against the failures of overreach and mismanagement. Yet questions lingered. Would these reforms bring about stability, or would they breed further discontent among the populace? As the U.S. scrabbled to redefine its economic future, another crisis loomed on the horizon. This time, it would define not only banking, but also the role of government in everyday financial life. Could the nation navigate through the treacherous waters of mistrust and forge a new path forward? The echoes of 1814 served as both a warning and a lesson, but would it be enough? Would history repeat itself, or had the time finally come for lasting change?